Welcome back to Fight for Liberty. Today on Deep Dive Episode 5, we're looking at House Resolution 6666, better known as the TRACE Act. This stands for the COVID-19 Testing, Reaching, and Contacting Everyone Act, and it is the suggested next step in the House of Representatives to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. It was written by Representative Bobby Rush, a Democrat from Illinois' 1st District, and currently has 58 co-sponsors, all of whom are Democrats now that Jeff Van Drew has withdrawn his support. This bill isn't too long, but it's full of details to pay attention to. So let's dive in. First thing we see in this bill is its name, and that is my first point of concern. To authorize the Secretary of Health and Human Services to award grants to eligible entities to conduct diagnostic testing for COVID-19 and related activities such as contact tracing through mobile health units and, as necessary, at individuals' residence and for other purposes. Now we see back in that first line a main problem. We see that it is not a course of action. It is an authorization given to someone to hire someone else that will then come up with a course of action. Much like the Green New Deal, this bill gives very little information on what the House is actually suggesting. But let's continue to look at what information we do have. Section 2 takes up the entire rest of the bill, so I'll be breaking this up by subsection letters from here on out. Opening up with subsection A, which starts off discussing contact tracing using mobile health units. This is the, quote, in general part of the bill where you find most of what you're looking for, and it's basically a repetition and clarification of the full title. Again, it authorizes the Secretary of Health and Human Services to award a grant to eligible entities to conduct testing and tracing of COVID-19 through the use of mobile health units and in-home testing. It then goes in subsection B to discuss the permitted use of funds for these grants, which include to hire, train, compensate, and pay expenses for their employees, and also to purchase personal protective equipment and other supplies. Now, C gives priority to both organizations proposing to work in hotspots and those applicants that agree to hire staff who are residents of the community where they will be working. This will help those feeling the worst of this disaster the most and the fastest. Subsection D makes a priority to disperse these grants across urban and rural areas. Now, E states that this bill cannot override the federal privacy and confidentiality requirements in the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act and the Public Health Services Act. This gives us at least one layer of protection from all this information being used against us. Not a big layer, but a layer. Now, subsection F is where this all gets really tricky. It's where we start defining terminology within this document. It first defines eligible entity, listing schools, charities, colleges, churches, as well as disproportionate share hospitals and federally qualified health centers. But in the last piece of the definition, it says, an other type of entity that is determined by the secretary to be an eligible entity. This basically giving Alex Azar the power to unilaterally decide who gets the money. The bill then goes on to define the term emergency period. Well, it tries to define it, but it sent us on a bit of a goose chase to find it. It gives us the same meaning as is given to it in section 1135 G1B of the Social Security Act. But when we go back and look at that, we find that it just gives it the same definition as you find in section 319 of the Public Health Services Act. There we get our answer, which is, for the most part, till the secretary says it's over. Every 90 days, the secretary has to say, yep, we're still in an emergency, and that would satisfy the requirements of the TRACE Act. Now, subsection G caps it all off with such a tiny section at the end, it almost looks like an afterthought. This is where they authorize $100 billion of spending to this project for the fiscal year 2020, and then, quote, such sums as may be necessary for each of fiscal year 2021 and subsequent fiscal years during which the emergency period continues. They give a huge dollar amount for this year and leave an open-ended total for every year to come. This gives them the ability to continue the state of emergency for years, as they have done with dozens of other emergency situations, and continue to spend your tax dollars on tracking and tracing who you come into contact with and when. Now, I'm not a denier. I do believe the coronavirus is real. We have to take measures to stop it. So I do not blame everyone that is supporting this bill. The language in it is so vague and so centralized, however, that it really does worry me. It seems that House Dems have taken the words of Rahm Emanuel to heart when he said, "You never want a serious crisis to go to waste." And what I mean by that is it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not before. Are we really just dropping $100 billion on a third-party solution for maybe a quarter of the problem? Is that the only way the government thinks? Just throw money at it until it goes away? Do they realize we work for that money every day? Now, as I said, I'm not a denier, and I understand the need to do something. Therefore, this is not an elect the revolution episode by any means. I'm not condemning the politicians who are co-signing this bill, only the ones who wrote it, and the people who continue to vote for or not vote against the corrupt, power-hungry people that keep moving the needle further and further from freedom.